write a story. I recommend anyone who is struggling in life, or who, you know, is overcome by emotions, whether you're in a slump in life and you don't know what to do, whether you've got a lot of things going on in your life, a lot of things troubling you, or whether you simply are trying to figure out what the fuck to do with your own life, you know, or whether you're just a creative who likes to write, maybe you haven't written in a while. I recommend everyone write a story. Now, this story can be your own personal story that's absolutely truth in the form of a journal, which you pick up and start writing things down in. You know, I always recommend, it's up to you, whatever you prefer. Some people might prefer to write on their iPad or their tablet or their laptop. Me personally, I like to write on my laptop sometimes. Sometimes I like to write on my phone and my text and save it in drafts. But really, most of the time, I like to write, as much as I've written most of my book on my laptop, I like to write things down a lot, like physically with a pen. You know, I like to use a biro, normally a black or blue biro, just on fucking normal lined padded paper, and write down the old-fashioned way. And you know, when you write down your thoughts, or a diary entry or journal, it gets it out of your head, you know. One other thing I like to do while we're on the subject, which is slightly different, but basically is has the same kind of, a similar kind of effect, it's quite therapeutic, is I like to just speak, as I'm doing right now. But you know, some of my book that I'm writing is actually me just speaking, recording myself, and then typing out what I'm saying, sometimes editing it for too many ums, but essentially there's something wonderful about just speaking to a recorder and listening back to yourself. And not even the listening back to yourself is quite therapeutic as well, but the main thing is just the speaking. You know, if you've got a lot of troubles going on in your mind, maybe it's something to do with your childhood, whatever the fuck it is, maybe you're depressed, maybe, you know, there's a reason that people go to counselling, and part of it is to be able to be given the opportunity and the permission almost to speak and talk about their emotions and their feelings and how they feel about life and what they're thinking, you know. And oftentimes they don't even know what the fuck they're feeling or thinking until they start to speak it, and then it just comes out. Well, in the same way, I think as speaking is very beneficial, I think also writing down things is very beneficial. I recommend everybody, you know, start to maybe keep a journal or a diary, you know, and then if you want to do what I'm doing, I'm currently writing a book which has a massive autobiographical element to it. The first third of the book is essentially an autobiography, which kind of talks about my life, and that was very therapeutic, and it allowed me to kind of look back at my life and realise like why I am the way I am, and kind of get it out of my system, and kind of just like, oh, okay, it's out of my mind, I understand this is a wonderful thing to share with other people, how can I help other people with this, you know, as well, which is part of the reason I'm writing the book, the Let You Be You Life Camp Handbook. But anyway, regardless of whether you write a journal or not, I think, or whether you're going to write a proper book or it's going to be a proper autobiography, I recommend everyone just write down how they're feeling, even if it's just a fucking little paragraph for yourself, even if no one sees it, you know, and write a story about and what's the story you're going to tell yourself about what's going on, you know. I also recommend people literally write a story. If you're somebody that, you know, wants to write in any capacity, I think imagination is a massive thing. So even if you don't want to become an actual novel writer who writes a story like Harry Potter or whatever, you know, like you don't want to be J.K. Rowling and be a fiction writer, you just like to write in it may be a completely different form. Maybe you like to write poetry, maybe you like to write philosophical pieces, maybe you like to write blog posts, whatever it is. I do recommend that you all write a story which is either a story about yourself, which is very real in the form of a journal, or a story which genuinely is something which is made up, and oftentimes you'll find if you make something up, unless it's completely like I was going to say, unless it's completely out of the blue fantasy, then it won't have elements of your real life and who you are in it. But of course, even then, of course it will. You know, as Russell Brand said recently, I heard him say, I think on a Joe Rogan Experience podcast, I think he said, all culture comes from consciousness, and absolutely it does. And there's always the reason that we resonate as human beings with books and films and art is because it's telling a story of our own life. Almost we can connect to it, because even if we can't literally connect to it, and we can't imagine going through some of the things that some people have gone through and written about, or whether that be a real person's autobiography or a fictional story, there are always elements of truth that we can resonate with in our own life to some degree. You know, it's the idea of the hero's journey. I've made a video about that, so do your research on that if you want to. But I recommend everybody start writing a story. And if you are a writer, that was the point I was going to make before. If you are a writer but you don't want to be a fiction writer, you might think it's useless to try to come up with a story, but it's not. You know, it's a good thing that in English class growing up, they sometimes made us write stories in primary school and in secondary school and high school, right? And I think it's something that I recommend everyone challenge themselves to do. If it's a short story, and if it's a ridiculous story and don't know where the fuck it's going, be creative with it. You know, you're not only is it good for somebody who wants to write that, it's also good as a writer to try to be imaginative and come up with something, and to also engage in different genres and styles of writing. And it's good for all human beings to engage in a creative activity, which gets the creative juices flowing, and as I always say, creates neurological pathways, or perhaps reopens the muscle memory, so the creative muscle memory, metaphorically, so to speak, in your body. And it doesn't matter if you're a guitarist or a musician or a filmmaker or a photographer or a speaker or any kind of creative. I recommend you all write a story. Even if it's a silly little story, makes no sense, you don't have to give it to anyone. It's a little story about some animals that fucking speak to each other, or something stupid, like, you know, something not stupid, but, you know, something as that you'd be like, oh, that's ridiculous, I'm an adult, I'm not going to write a story about that. Like, well, there you go. You have to be creative, and you have to engage in activities which are creative. Just like I said, I recommend everyone make a tent. You know, you might think, oh, that's a very childlike thing to do, I'm not going to make a tent. Well, maybe you should loosen up a bit in life and do things. No one, you know, you don't have to write a story if you don't want to. It's just something I've found to be beneficial to me. Gets my creative juices flowing. It can be very therapeutic if you write a journal about yourself or come up with a story, and it can be, you know, all of the above. And I recommend everyone write a story. Take care. You can do it, people.